Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Trevor with Maker Experiment, and today we're going to talk about 5 tips for laser engraving. Let's get into it. Tip number 1 is to use painter's tape for testing different kinds of engraving. So what I mean by this is if you're not sure where something's going to land on a piece, or you're not sure if when doing rotary it's going to come out looking correct, you can use painter's tape as a way to test it without actually engraving the material. So I do have a piece of wood here. I have painter's tape on it already. I'm going to engrave this here in a minute and show you how it turns out and how you can easily peel it off and then use the actual piece. The trick to using painter's tape is to run it at low power so that it doesn't blow through the tape. But let's go ahead and I'll show you what that looks like. Here's what it looks like with the painter's tape when it's engraved. So it looks kind of white. But if I were to just go ahead and say peel this off, my peeling skills can use some work. But here's the other one. So you can see that where it was engraved on the painter's tape, nothing is there anymore. And then just like the last spot, still can't peel. But if you use the painter's tape, it basically looks like nothing ever happened in the first place. It allows you to use your material again and again and again to get the look right as far as placement and size and things like that. Now it's difficult to tell what it will look like on the actual material as far as, you know, if it's going to burn well or the coloring, whatever it might be. But you at least know where it's going to land and what it's going to look like size-wise, if it's skewed, stuff like that. Now the next few tips, I'm going to engrave kind of all side by side. I'm going to use this board to lay out all of the options. That way you can see them all one right after the other. So I'll talk through all of the tips and then show you the clips with those, and at the end we'll recap all of those. Tip number 2 is going to be engraving a vector outline around your actual engraving. This works really well if your design is on kind of a laminate wood and you want it to look kind of lighter in the engraved area and a little bit darker around the borders. Doing a vector outline to your engraving makes it pop a little bit more than it normally would, and is a great way to do it without sacrificing a bunch of time. So I'm going to engrave those side by side, one where it's just the engraving and then one with the outline so that you can see what they look like right next to each other. Before we go into tip number 3, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, EPILOG Laser. I've been working with EPILOG since about 2019, and I've actually been using their machine since about 2013. So I've been using them for about a decade now. They're really well built. I love using them. They're definitely meant for running a business. But if you're a hobbyist and you're looking to start a business, they're also a great way to get into the industry. For this video, I'm using the EPILOG Fusion Maker 30 watt. It is an RF tube laser. It works super well. I'm really impressed with how well it's built. And it still has a lot of the features that are in the higher end EPILOG machines. If you want to check out EPILOG's machinery, I'll leave a link in the description below that will take you to their website. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to comment them below and I will do my best to answer all of those questions. Let's go on to tip number 3. Tip number 3 is to engrave things out of focus. So typically when you are working with the machinery, You want to engrave in focus because that gives you your optimal look. It can be advantageous at times to actually purposely throw it out of focus, which means lowering the bed beyond its ideal height so that you get a little bit of a darker engraving. Now, there's some trade-offs to this where you might lose some of the resolution, but depending on the design, it can be a great way to get a darker look without sacrificing your speed. When I engrave out of focus, I try to keep it between 0.15 inches and 0.25 inches out of focus. If you go too much far beyond that, it can really start to degrade the resolution. And if you don't go far enough, you don't really get the effect that I'm talking about here. So we're going to go ahead and engrave one out of focus. And at the end, I'm going to show it next to the other engraving so that you can see exactly how it compares. I will be engraving this about 0.25 inches out of focus just for a reference point. I just finished the engravings for tips 1, 2, and 3. So tip 1, I've shown you, this is the painter's tape where it's just white. I did re-engrave it so that I could show it side by side. Tip 2 was outlining it. So this engrave one and this engrave with outline one are the exact same settings. The only difference is the placement on the wood and then the fact that this one has a vector outline. You can see how much more it stands out just by doing that outline. Now, there may be slight variation in how it engraved because its placement on the wood is different, but you can also see how it pops more just because it has those lines. And then the third one, this is the same settings as these two are. The only difference here is I lowered the bed 1/4 of an inch. And by doing that, you can see how much darker it really made it. But that's why trying out these different things and experimenting with the material can give you very different results by changing a couple of levers. But here you can see the results of some of these tips. Tip number 4 is color mapping. Color mapping is a great tool in my mind. Not only can color mapping separate between engraving and cutting, but you can also use color mapping to separate different shades of engraving on the same material. Now, on this one, I'm not going to show the engraving process because I did this example a while ago, but this is a good example of what I'm talking about. This material is leather, it's vegetable tan leather that is purple. And if you see here, there's some writing that's more of a lighter shade of purple, and then this engraving that's a darker shade. The whole purpose of this was to show how different settings on the same material produce different looks. The best part about this is you can input them all into the job at the same time. I'm going to show you on the computer what that graphic looked like and then how it compared to the real thing. All right, here is my graphic. So the words were in black, the other design was in blue, and then the cutting border was in red. So if you look at my design up close here, you can see where the blue equates to that darker line. So it's actually just engraved a little bit deeper. It gets through that top coat of purple. The black are the lighter letters that have that faded kind of look because they were engraved with really light settings. So this one design resulted in this as the engraving. Tip number 5 is to save the settings that you come up with for future use and repeatability. Now on the EPILOG software, there's an easy way to export your settings, give it a name, and it will save it to the dashboard so you can just go in, click it, and use it again. Most laser softwares have that functionality. Now, how you do it may be slightly different, but they all should have the option to be able to save those settings. That's why when you see a lot of my videos and I'm just clicking a couple buttons and all of my settings populate, that is what I do. I save them for future use. It's great if you can name them something really descriptive, such as vector scoring on wood, or light engraving on wood, dark engraving on wood, things like that, so that you have a better understanding of what the final result is going to be. But those are the 5 tips that I use when I am laser engraving that have helped me not only come up with new ideas, but also test things without wasting a bunch of material. But hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so that you know when I come out with new videos. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments below. Make sure to check out my Instagram @MakerExperiment, where I share things along the way. But I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I'll see you in the next one.